Hello. This is part 5, my journey to loving myself. And today I want to tell you a story. The story I'm going to tell you about something called the butterfly effect. So the story begins in 1961, and there's this mathematician, climatologist, and his name is Edward Lorenz. And Edward Lorenz is doing some kind of an experiment to try to figure out if he can predict climatic change around the world. And he does an experiment and he gets a certain result. And then he decides he wants to do this experiment again, but he really wants to go get a cup of coffee. And so he plugs in the information one more time, but instead of plugging in the numbers to 6 decimal points like he had done before, he says, I'm just gonna round up, and he plugs it in with 3 decimal points. He puts in the number and he goes away. What happens is when he comes back just a few minutes later, his results are completely different. And he says, what? I put in the same numbers. How can these results be completely different? And what's interesting is, let me read to you what he writes in his diary. He says the following. At one point, I decided to repeat some of the computations in order to examine what was happening in greater detail. I stopped the computer, typed in a line of numbers that it had printed out a while earlier, and set it running again. I went down the hall for a cup of coffee and returned after about an hour, during which time the computer had simulated about 2 months of weather. The numbers being printed were nothing like the old ones. I immediately suspected that something was wrong, so he thought something was wrong, and he starts looking and he realized, no, the machine was perfectly good. The only difference was that instead of putting in the 6 decimal points, he put in only 3 decimal points, and he realized that the small, tiny difference in the numbers, okay, had created eventually within the 2 months a huge difference in the weather prediction and what was going to be happening. And he says, this was enough to tell me what had happened. The numbers that I had typed in were not the exact original numbers, but were the rounded off values that had appeared in the original printout. The initial round off errors were the culprits. They were steadily amplifying until they dominated the solution. So eventually he realized that little tiny differences, little tiny changes on one side of the world eventually get greater and greater and greater and greater, exponentially grow, and what they cause are big differences down the line. He eventually calls this the butterfly effect, saying that a butterfly flapping its wing on one side of the world eventually will create a tornado or a hurricane somewhere else down the line. Why is this important in our lives? Because when our pain and when our discomfort and when our aching causes us to realize that we need to make changes, we do not have to make huge changes to start off with. We can make small, tiny changes, but if we keep going and going and keep up, be steady, and continue with these changes, those changes will eventually cause big changes in our lives. For example, this is something I learned in my personal development group that I'm working with my mentor, Yair Bar-Lev. The little changes that I have made in the way I put food in my mouth. For example, let's see, I've cut down about 90% of my carbs. Not completely, but about 90%. I've cut down my intake of gluten. I've cut down my sugars. Not completely, not huge changes, but I've slowly cut down. And you know, if you stay like this, if I am mindful of the little changes I'm making, this eventually, it's been about 8 months, are slowly making bigger and bigger and bigger differences in my health and in my weight loss, okay? little tiny changes eventually exponentially grow, and they make a big difference down the road. And why am I telling you about the butterfly effect? Because I'm very excited. On Wednesday, in 2 days, I am starting a 3-day seminar with our support group, led by Yair Bar-Lev, my guru, my a personal training coach, one of them. And it's going to be a very powerful 3-day personal empowerment seminar. And it's called the Butterfly Effect because Yair calls his program the Butterfly Effect. We are going to learn to make small changes that will be life-changing down the road. It's an experiential kind of training where all day till 1 in the morning we are learning and we are practicing and we're training. And boy, I'm so very excited. It's going to be 3 days. So not only am I working on my weight loss and getting healthier, and of course with my guiding and my building my business, but right now I'm focusing on my personal development, and I'm going to go on for a 3-day program for incredible life-changing experiences. Whew. So I wish for you to maybe one day also participate in some kind of a life-changing seminar. I'd love for you to share if you have, because I've never done anything like this before, and this will be the first of many to come. I know it's going to be amazing. So I'm excited about this. I will tell you all about it when I'm done. And I wish for you small, tiny, butterfly flapping kind of changes that eventually will become bigger and bigger and exponentially make a huge difference in your life. The butterfly effect. I will see you soon. Bye.